Hello everyone, a heartfelt welcome back to our enigmatic Mid-9M channel. Allow me to cordially invite you all to a spine-chilling narrative, a tale of the weird and uncanny unfolding today. Brace yourselves, hit the like button for our meticulously crafted video, subscribe to our channel, and share the uncanny story to keep the adrenaline rush flowing. Now, plunge headfirst with me into a tale, a chilling reminiscence from when I was just a wide-eyed 10-year-old, which still sends icy shivers racing down my spine. Let me start this out by saying I am a very rational person, and I believe there is always a rational explanation for almost everything that happens. Now, with that being said, let me tell you a story about an experience I have had in the past I would not exactly call rational, but more of a paranormal experience. This all happened around the time I was 9, maybe 10 years old. I know that seems like it was a long time ago, but things like this you can just forget. It was late November, early December. Snow was just starting to fall, and it was starting to get cold. It was around 9 p.m. and I had two of my closest friends staying overnight at my house planning to play PlayStation and other things 10-year-olds do. For privacy reasons, I'm going to call them Jack and Sam, and I have known each of them since around the 2nd grade. Sam was more of a risk taker than Jack and liked to try unusual and new things. Jack was more of a play it safe and stick to the normal kind of kid. Now that we kind of have a background of everyone, let's get back to the story. It was around 9 p.m. and we had just set up the PlayStation and had the new Madden football game at the time set up and ready to play. We also had snack and Mountain Dew and the necessities to pull an all-nighter at that age. After a couple hours of playing games and horsing around, Sam goes to my room to get something from his bag he had brought over with clothes and etc. After a few minutes, he came back out to the living room where we were set up and asked us if we wanted to try something new and fun. As he said this, he slowly brought out an Ouija board from behind his back with a huge mischievous smile spreading across his face. I, being only 10 at the time, was curious about the board as I had heard about it, but never actually seen one. Jack, being Jack, of course, said no and kept telling Sam to put it back where he had gotten it from. After a bit of coercing and begging, Sam and I got Jack to finally play with the board with us. We got it all set up and looked at a slip of paper that was sitting with the board in the box. The paper was labeled "Caution." Ouiji boards are not toys. Proceed with caution. Under this was a list of rules on what to do and do not do with the board. We read a few of the ones that seemed most important and then proceeded to finish setting up the board for use. Now, this is a warning I extend to whomever is reading this. No matter what you believe, there is something out there. And if you are not careful, there can and will be consequences, so please be careful and do your research before doing anything unusual or has to do with the paranormal. Now, after a bit of going over some of the rules and reading the instructions on how to begin use with the board, we all began by placing our fingers on the planchette and looking at each other nervously. Jack kept pleading to just go play some more Madden, but Sam kept insisting he stay just for a few minutes to see what happened. He agreed, seemed to be getting more and more nervous after every second that went by. We designated Sam as the medium, or the person who asks the questions, so he began by asking, "Are there any spirits in the room that would like to come and speak to us? Please communicate by using the board only." We waited a few minutes before he asked again. We waited. Nothing happened. After a few more unsuccessful attempts at contacting a spirit and around 30 minutes of waiting, still nothing was happening, and even Jack was becoming a little restless. Eventually, Sam got tired of nothing, so he shouted out, "Is there anything that would like to speak with us?" This time, after a couple of minutes, the planchette started to slowly move towards yes. It was almost as if the planchette was going at a slow crawl towards the yes, as it took almost 45 seconds for this to happen. Sam had a huge grin on his face as this was all happening, and you could sense the unease in Jack as his eyes seemed to be popping out of his eye sockets as he stared in disbelief at the board. I looked up at Sam and asked if he was moving it, and he said no. Then I asked Jack, and he muttered a simple no under his breath, still in shock at what was happening. After a minute of asking who was moving it, Sam decided to ask another question. This time he asked, "Can you tell us your name?" Again, after a few seconds, the planchette slowly moved to the letter T, then to the H, then to a then Z. "Thaz is your name?" Sam asked, delighted at the thought of talking to a spirit. The planchette moved to yes and stopped. Jack Point seemed more amused than afraid of the board and whoever or whatever was talking with us. After a few more simple questions like "Are you male or female?" and "favorite food and animal," and anything a 10-year-old can think of was asked, Sam asked, "Are you a good or evil spirit?" After a few seconds, the planchette started to move towards no and stopped. We all looked at each other with a shared uneasy feeling in our eyes. "No," I asked quickly. The planchette then moved to yes. Again, we all looked at each other with unease as Sam then asked, "What do you mean, no?" The planchette then slowly spelled out the words "no spirit." Jack at this point stared at the board, slowly starting to freak out and begging Sam to let him leave. But Sam told Jack to man up and made him continue to play. Sam then asked, "If you are not a spirit, then what are you?" The planchette started to move towards the letter D, then stopped for a minute. We all looked at each other again, but this time with confusion showing on our faces. Just as we were about to ask what he meant by D, the planchette then continued to spell out the word demon. Jack immediately took his hands of the planchette and ran into the kitchen, starting to slowly sob. Not thinking about the board or Thaz, we ran after him, following him into the kitchen to try to calm him down. Not remembering rule number 24 stating never leave the planchette on the board if you are not utilizing it. We stayed in the kitchen for around 20 minutes begging Jack to come back and play with us and finish the game, or at least end it. Eventually moving back into the living room where the board was, the first thing we noticed was the planchette was halfway off the board and on the floor. Sam quickly ran over, realizing it and remembering rule 8 that if the planchette falls from the board, a soul will get released. Of course, Sam didn't tell us and just asked us if we could end the game. We all agreed and quickly asked if we could say goodbye, and the planchette moved on to no. After a few more times of asking, we eventually forced the planchette to goodbye. And we left the board on the ground and we all went to the couch and talked about what we had just experienced for around an hour before finally calming down. It was around 4 a.m. by the time we all decided it had been a long night and it was time to head to bed. I woke up in a sweat around 6 a.m. and woke Sam and Jack and told them I had a dream about a small 8-year-old boy that was running back and forth for what felt like hours. They told me it was just a weird dream and I should just go back to bed as we were all still really tired. We all woke up at around noon to the sound of a loud banging noise and realized it was my dad knocking on the door to unlock it and let him in. We didn't speak about this experience again, but we put the Ouija board away in the box and put it in a corner in the attic since no one ever went up there and it was full of old boxes and spider webs and nasty things. The next week went by and nothing seemed to be happening out of the ordinary and there was no more weird dreams. But the next weekend on a Saturday I was left home alone for the night and decided to stay up and play video games. After a few hours I got bored and decided to head to bed as it was around 1 a.m. I quickly dozed off and slept for about 2 hours before waking up to the sound of someone running. It was faint and me, being tired, just assumed the TV in the living room was on and fell back asleep. It didn't last long as I was quickly awakened by more running, which sounded like it was coming from right above me. It sounded like someone was in the attic and was running back and forth across it. I ended up going into the living room and sitting for around 15 minutes listening to this before eventually calling Sam to tell him what was going on. But for some reason the house phone wasn't getting a tone and me being 10 didn't have my own cell phone yet. I decided I would just put in headphones and try and ignore it and fall asleep on the couch till my dad got home. I slowly drifted off into sleep till around 9 a.m. when I awoke to the door closing and my dad arriving home. I never ended up telling Sam or Jack or even my dad what I had heard that night, but everything seemed fine for about another week, and I just assumed it was a rat or some sort of animal running in the attic, or maybe even the wind, anything rational to help me sleep at night. About 2 weeks after that night, something I'm still unable to rationally explain happened. It was around 11 p.m. and my dad and I were getting ready for bed. I was in the shower washing up and my dad was in the living room. As I'm getting out of the shower and heading to my room, my dad asks me if I smell smoke. I took a few sniffs and realized it smelled like something was burning. I told him this, and he started to look in the basement and kitchen and everywhere while I got dressed. After I came out of my room clothed and confused, he told me to help him move a dresser under the attic entrance. I did, and he asked me to look if there was a fire in the attic. I climbed up on top of this dresser, which was almost as tall as me already, and then opened up the slab of ceiling that led into the dark room of an attic. I poked my head in and realized the smell was much greater, and then started to look around. As my sight crossed the corner of the attic, which we had hid the board in only 3 weeks earlier, I noticed it seemed to be darker than the rest of the corners. I realized the more I looked at the corner, the easier it was to see into it. And I swear for just a second I seen a small kid, no taller than 5 foot, appear and give me a huge grin before the Ouija board which he was standing on burst into flames and started to engulf that corner of the attic. I shouted for my dad and told him the house was on fire and we needed to leave, which we did, and then we called the fire department, who came and put out the fire only after it had burnt away the side of the house and part of the roof. After we was allowed to return to the house to receive our belongings, I went to the attic and looked at the corner. Seeing that the Ouija board didn't have a single burn mark on it, I decided to do what any normal 10-year-old would do, and I threw it away and hoped it would never have to see it again. This experience has changed my entire outlook on the paranormal, and that anything that can be rationally explained may not be rational at all.